All right, let's go ahead and get started. Well, again, good evening. I want to thank all of our guests for coming here for our attendance today. Happy Black Philanthropy Month. This is an incredible time to celebrate African descent giving. We have the founder of Black Philanthropy Month here with us today, Dr. Jackie Copeland. We're going to be having a conversation with her in a few moments about her origination of this month and its purpose. And we also have some distinguished leaders across philanthropy, the nonprofit community, and a couple mayors with us today to talk about the significance of public-private partnerships. We want to be able to explore what Black Philanthropy Month has meant over these past 20 years, and also be able to celebrate what Black leaders are able to do in the space of philanthropy in general, not just in the United States of America, but across the world. It is worth reporting that the W.K. Kellogg Foundation shares that nearly two-thirds of African American households donate to organizations and causes each year, and that sums to a total of about $11 billion. So we want to give fundamental tips and effective suggestions on how to connect with leaders in the philanthropic space who come from a variety of different and diverse backgrounds, particularly African and Black, and understand how we can use their expertise to promote and generate social equity, because social equity and community empowerment is definitely at our forefront as we navigate challenging times that we are in today's world. So let's go ahead and get started. As I said, we're going to begin with a fireside chat with Dr. Jackie Copeland. Dr. Copeland is an award-winning innovator who bridges diverse disciplines and communities to heal people, society, and the planet. She is the founder and the chief executive officer of an organization called the Woman Invested to Save Earth Fund. That has been the backbone of her establishment in the Black Philanthropy Month, and also an organization called Reunity. Her WISE has focused on financial inclusion, equity, innovation, and has blended advocacy and capital to support Black, Indigenous, and allied entrepreneurs and activists. And we are so extremely happy to have Dr. Copeland with us today. We're going to introduce the other four speakers once we get to the panel, but for the first 10 minutes or so, we want to have a one-on-one conversation with Dr. Copeland to, again, get her motivation and inspiration for creating this very important month in which we are here to discuss today. Dr. Copeland, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's Black Philanthropy Month.
It is, yes. Congrats on again and on your involvement in your leadership here. You have been sort of the Kickstarter, not to just this conversation, but just celebrating Black leaders in this space. Help me understand 20 years ago, over 20 years ago in 2001, what motivated you to create Black Philanthropy Month, and why did you see a need for it?
Yeah, backstory. So this is my 40th year in philanthropy. And one of the things that you continue to hear, no matter what kind of philanthropy you're working with, is that Black people don't give. And to tell you the full honest truth, I was fed up with hearing it. I mean, I was immersed in giving of all types when I was growing up. I've worked throughout what I call the Black world. And it's something that children do, adults do, is how you become a responsible Black citizen of whatever country or community you're living in. And I think that assumption is just part of a whole set of racist assumptions of our inferiority, of our alleged lack of initiative and agency. And there's several threads that come together to have a vision like this. You know, part of it is also my ancestors. Giving is how we got through the worst times of our history. There was no foundation, there was no government that was going to help us. It was us. And that's true across the globe. Also, I happen to be living in the Twin Cities of Minnesota, which in 2000, the census said had the most ethnically diverse Black community of any metropolitan area in the US. So if you were really going to do Black philanthropy in a place like Minnesota or the Twin Cities, you had to figure out how to work with Africans, Black Caribbean people, Black people from Latin America had the largest population of Somalis, Liberians, and Kenyans living outside of their country, right in the Twin Cities. And so it became, as the Twin Cities are in some ways, like ground zero, for global movements for racial justice. Certainly is today, and was starting to become that back in 2000. So those factors came together to inspire the incubation of what would become Black Philanthropy Month as early as 2000, with a group of Black women from 20 countries who were trying to figure out how to give time, talent, treasure, anything they had to help our communities and figure out how to care for our communities while caring for ourselves. And that core impetus is what drives Black Philanthropy Month to this day. Our giving really has shaped American and global history. Even though we sometimes take it for granted, we need to teach it as a part of our culture, our history, and the engine of our future.
Absolutely. And you've been able to manifest this into a global movement, as you just mentioned and alluded to. And even here in the US, you've been able to work with individuals like Bakari Sellers and a myriad of people who've made this campaign extremely successful. Going back to the concept of Black leaders in philanthropy, particularly leaders who are willing to focus on racial equity and social justice, how has that been significant? The experience of highlighting Black leaders who want to utilize philanthropy to create opportunities and bridge the gaps of opportunities that exist in America and around the world.
Yeah, so we have a Black giving ecosystem, if I can use that word. And there are different types of philanthropic institutions. And so there are Black people who work for various kinds of foundations. They didn't found the foundations, but they have their fingers on the purse strings of some significant dollars that can be used to promote racial equity and justice. And I was one of those professionals working for all kinds of foundations. And there's a unique set of challenges one encounters as a Black philanthropic professional. And we're fortunate to have the Association of Black Foundation Executives, which has existed as, in a way, our legacy professional philanthropy industry institution that's really helping Black leaders navigate the racism that can exist at philanthropic institutions. Then there is what some call community or grassroots philanthropy, all of our giving circles, our institutions like our churches. And then there's everything in between.
Yes.
And so it is a very vibrant, innovative sector that, especially when we act collectively and in partnership, has the capacity, not just the funding, but the moral authority, the community mobilization authority, the intellectual and social capital to address the challenges we're facing effectively. One ongoing issue is that our giving is sometimes fragmented. We have those working for corporate foundations and private foundations and our giving circles. And we have the African American philanthropy, and we have the Black immigrant philanthropy. Like that Kellogg figure you cited is true, is great, but Black immigrants in the US give $13 billion a year. So if you add the two, no, 12 billion. If you add the two numbers, we have a $23 billion economy of giving, and that's just in the US, and it's probably an underestimate. So what would happen if we came together to figure out, no matter what kind of philanthropy we're doing, what our interests are, where we were born? You know, Black people always argue about what to call themselves, African American, Black. I hear a new term every day. I figure that's just part of our culture. We're going to argue about that forever. Doesn't matter to me. You call yourself what you want to call yourself. But at the end of the day, what are you doing beyond complaining with your own time, talent, treasure, testimony, voice, ties to make things better? And
Absolutely.
that's what Black philanthropy is about, coming together as one people to increase the impact
Mhm.
of our giving for our our people, but the world
Right.
as well.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that, Dr. Copeland. As a final question to you, and you spoke to some of this in the last couple of minutes, we have, to your point, organizations like the Association of Black Foundation Executives. We have, foundation leaders, Ms. Tonya Wellens, who's on a panelist today. We have Rochester, New York, who has a Black male who's going to be leading the helm there, plus the Kellogg Foundation, a variety of others. Black leaders are in these instrumental spaces to make significant impact. Plus, we have, to your point, while it's siloed, we have giving amongst Black households and immigrants. Over the next few years, when we continue to celebrate African descent giving through Black Philanthropy Month, how do you hope, what are some of the objectives that you hope come out of this campaign on a yearly basis, that we can set and reach, so that our giving power as a Black society globally becomes more effective, and we can learn how to better strategically harness it? What are some objectives that come to mind that you hope that we achieve over the next
Good
couple?
question. And I think and dream about it and plan for it a lot. So first of all, like other communities that have diversity within diversity, think about Latino. That's all kinds of people. Folks born in the US, been here for generations, recent immigrants, and they have their own issues, right, in Latin America. But the same for Asian community, right? But the Asian community was able to come together and really push that anti-Asian hate bill through Congress. We don't have the equivalent in the US, okay? African Americans are doing their thing, then Black immigrants of different groups are doing kind of their thing, and we would be much more powerful if we could decide, at least on a couple of issues, that we're not going to tolerate anymore, and that we're going to use all our time, treasure, get over our divisions to push policy and to give strategically. It could be, there's so many issues. After African immigrants are here for about 10 years, they also start to have the highest rates of infant and maternal mortality in the US. It could have been living in a refugee camp in Kenya, but there is something about being in the US, and there are a lot of theories, that makes the Black body very ill. That could be an issue. And so I hope that we can build a global identity that creates a foundation or a forum for us to collaborate as we need to address common challenges. Our diversity is a strength, and if we could figure out how to work collectively as necessary, we would be more powerful, just like other ethnicities do, and that's just the United States. I would hope, I dream about a global Black giving economy where African Americans, maybe for some reason you found out that your roots were from Cameroon or Nigeria, that you identify some issues in a village that you're going to support, and vice versa. We Africans supporting America and other people in the global Black diaspora, that we could actually provide mutual support. First, get educated beyond the stereotypes and the general knowledge. Just get educated about each other's countries and history, and respect each other as human beings, because justice starts in the home. So I'm hoping for that. I'm hoping that Black Philanthropy Month can be a tool to support giving circles
Mhm.
across the world. Sometimes our grassroots nonprofits are overlooked, but let's think about growing up. Where is the first place you went to, or your family, when you were in trouble? It was that neighborhood nonprofit, it was a church. For some people, it's the mosque. We must support our grassroots nonprofits. We have a 10-point funding equity agenda that our movement developed, and we're now trying to promote it through a pledge. I would hope that every Black philanthropic organization and business funding organization would sign the Global Black Funding Equity Pledge. I would hope that funding institutions of all backgrounds would adopt that pledge, because we believe as a movement, not just me, because we only exist because of all of the people who support us. We believe that those institutions that adopt those principles will be better equipped to promote equity in funding, which will spill over to racial equity and ultimately justice.
Hmm.
I have so many dreams. You have to shut me down. I have about 6 more, but I
Yeah. I thank you, Dr. Copeland. I mean, like as I
okay.
said, the entire what we're discussing here today and just this essence is because of you in many regards. So I appreciate your input. As Mayor Patterson-Howard says, if this was a church, she would definitely give you tithes because you just dropped a word. But I thank you
Well,
for your
you
input.
can still fund Black Philanthropy Month. That's our tithes.
Absolutely.
You can still do that, some of our spinoffs, but I do want to emphasize, and of course, I mean, this is my dream in part because of the trauma. I admit it now. I experienced as a Black person working in philanthropy, and always for me, I had to stay grounded in my community and in my
Certainly.
history, because that's my strength. That's the source. And I am a representative, but there is a legion of leaders that made Black Philanthropy Month possible, and of course the sacrifices of our ancestors. So
Certainly.
I will always name that. It's about us, it's not just about me.
Yeah.
And that next generation of leaders, many you on this panel, who are going to keep paying this forward after I'm long done and gone.
Thank you,
So
Doctor.
thanks for all you do for putting this together. I am still astounded when people celebrate Black Philanthropy Month, because it was really the imagination of a everyday Black woman who was trying to figure out how to keep her spirit
Certainly.
intact
Well,
in a
thank you.
really difficult field. So thank you for being there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Copeland. You're more than welcome to stick around if you'd like to hear the panel. We understand you're busy, but thank you for your
I'll
input.
be listening.
This would be remarkable.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to also give a reminder, please feel free to put questions into the Q&A box. We're about to transition into the panel discussion. Again, thank you to Dr. Copeland and also all of her contemporaries who have worked with her to organize Black Philanthropy Month and make it to what it's been 20 years later. And now we have a very distinguished panel who can go a little more in depth about the power of philanthropy and how to connect philanthropy to the nonprofit community and also to our state, local, and regional governments who are doing significant work. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our panel for this evening. We have Ms. Tonya Wellens. Tonya is the president and CEO of the Greater Washington Community Foundation. That foundation is the largest public foundation in its region with over $500 million in assets and over $70 million in annual grants. Tonya has more than 20 years of experience in public and private partnerships, financial access and inclusion, and in international development. She was also one of my inspirations for creating today's conversation. So I'm very happy to have her on today's panel. Tonya, thank you for joining us. Our next speaker is Mayor Shawyn Patterson-Howard, Mayor of the City of Mount Vernon. She has served as a trailblazer in the nonprofit community and in the government sector for over 25 years. She has done groundbreaking work in addressing HIV/AIDS, public health, criminal justice, education, housing, and urban development. And she's going to give us some very valuable expertise today on forming public-private partnerships and utilizing the tool of philanthropy to make impact in the community. Mayor Patterson-Howard, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Next, we have Mayor Malik Evans of Rochester, New York. Mayor has also mentioned that he served on the board of the Community Foundation in his local town of Rochester, New York, which is also my city. He previously served in the Rochester City Council and was an at-large member, and also served in the Rochester City School Board. He comes from the financial sector, and throughout his career, he has developed a focus to ensure that the financial sector responds to the need of all customers and with equity and fairness, and by ensuring that all individuals and businesses have access to the knowledge, tools, and information that will help build a stronger financial future. And of course, we're going to talk about inclusivity today as well as social equity. So we're very happy to have Mayor Evans input. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us today. And last and certainly not least, we have Ebonie Johnson Cooper. Ebonie is the founder of the Young Black and Giving Back Institute. This is an organization that serves Black-led, Black benefiting nonprofits and its leaders with a mission to provide capacity building, convenings, and funding that uniquely meets the social impact needs of organizations. She has worked with organizations like the Indiana University, Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, the Cleveland Foundation, the Washington Area Women's Foundation, and many others. And she's also been a teacher at Georgetown University, Trinity, Johns Hopkins, and the University of Maryland. And she's going to give us some great input today from the perspective of the nonprofit community. Ebonie, thank you so much for joining us. All right, so our first question is going to go to Tonya. Tonya, please elaborate for us. What is it like to be a Black woman CEO of a community foundation, a significant community foundation for that matter, and talk to us a little bit about your experience, please.
Thank you, Virgil, and thanks to all of you for joining us this evening and for the distinguished panel. I want to start by just having a moment to shout out Dr. Copeland for her vision and for her hopes and her dreams and aspirations and for sharing them with us. I think it is so important that we put into the universe what we are aiming for so that it invites others to join in the work. And so I just want to thank you for your vision and for your continued work. So it's interesting. I think it's a bit of a loaded question. What is it like to be a Black woman CEO in a major community foundation? And I would put on the end of that right now, because I think the last 2.5 years have, just created, a set of circumstances and situations that are challenging for any leader to navigate. But I'll say that I was named President CEO of the Community Foundation in March of 2020. And so I'm just going to say that my entree into this space as the CEO has been quite the experience, navigating a global pandemic, serving as community quarterback for our region and raising historic amounts of money, and then making important decisions, timely decisions about where to place those resources, given the conditions that many in our community were facing throughout the pandemic. And so it has been challenging and exciting. I think I'd say that we've been working at both extremes of the work, because we've been able to really rally and galvanize our community meaningfully. And it's been overwhelming. I mean, it's navigating the pandemic, navigating remote work, making strategic decisions that have an immediate impact on people's lives and livelihoods. And so it's been quite the challenge and the opportunity. I'll speak a little bit about the opportunity, Virgil, just very briefly, because there is a bit of privilege in the role of president and CEO when you have purview over significant resources and influence over people who have access to additional resources. And I would say that by way of mentioning, my peers in philanthropy and individual donors. As a community foundation, the bulk of our resources are held in donor advised funds, which means that individuals get to make decisions about where those resources go. but they're looking for, our and my leadership to help them think strategically about where those resources are placed. So it's an abundance of riches in terms of the opportunity, and it's an abundance of pressure when you think about the vast needs that are out there that even our resources cannot fully address. So it's been amazing. There are all the other things I would say in terms of the pressures of being a Black woman, a mom, a CEO that weigh on us, and we have to manage through those things in order to both do the work of community and also, of course, keep in perspective the relationships and the responsibilities you have as a member of a community of your own family.
Absolutely.
The last thing I want to say, Virgil, before I
Yes.
transition over, is that I'm just appreciating this, that even my entree into philanthropy has been an interesting one, because I used to have a visceral reaction to the word itself. For me, the word philanthropy was a highfalutin way of describing what we've always called giving back. I grew up in a small rural part of Virginia, and it was never mentioned that Black people don't give back. They don't give like that. I never heard that as a young person growing up. It was only introduced that notion was only introduced in formal philanthropy, and I hope there's an opportunity for us to spend some time in this exchange talking about the informal sector and the way that we give, and in terms of sort of the mischaracterizations of of what Black philanthropy has looked like in the past and what it might look like in the future.
Absolutely. No, we can definitely get to that. And I'm looking forward to talking more about your experience having taken the helm of your foundation at the peak of the pandemic, right? Because the pandemic and the challenges we were going through at that time, philanthropy was being tapped for a variety of different issues. So I'm interested in your perspective there later on. Mayor Patterson-Howard, I want to come to you next to talk about how municipalities can work with the Tonya Wellens of our society and other foundations in general to create public-private partnerships, and realizing that municipalities can leverage philanthropic dollars to, promote policies and development across communities. How do you look into engaging those partnerships, and how would you suggest other administrations across the country leverage those partnerships to bring change to the community? Love to have your input.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Virgil, for having me. And thank you, Dr. Copeland and Ms. Wellens for speaking before. Like I said, you've already touched upon so many of the things that I would want to say. I became mayor in January of 2020. So literally right before COVID hit. And as you stated, I've really worked in the government and the not-for-profit sector for almost 30 years. And so I understand that intersection, understanding how running your neighborhood organizations like a YMCA or Girl Scout troops, after school programs, really oftentimes are not supported at the level they should be locally, and trying to struggle and turning to, philanthropic organizations to help us in the not-for-profit sector, as well as to expand our capacity to become eligible for some of the larger funding that's available. And the same is true in government. In government, in the last 2.5 years, we've seen, unprecedented challenges, but, for every challenge, there is an opportunity. And so that's what we've used. And we've really pushed into working with our philanthropic organizations, our not-for-profit organizations, to provide the level of service to, a community that has been devastated. First of all, our Black and brown communities, already were devastated by education and crime and food insecurity and housing and education challenges. And COVID just really exposed even how deep the fissures really are. It's something that we've experienced in our community, and it's now something that other people have finally recognized. And so when we talk about equity and we talk about philanthropy, goodness, we have to make sure that we're partnering with the philanthropies to capitalize on the unprecedented private sector giving that has occurred in the past few years. You know, since George Floyd, I believe over $66 billion has been given to racial equity. The challenge is only about 1% of it has been given out. And even when you talk about government and the federal government and state government giving money, again, it's how is that money trickling and getting down to the people, right? And so corporate America can give, banks can give, and oftentimes, you know, they're looking for big organizations that can help manage that wealth, and that's where our philanthropies come in. And the philanthropies really are the bridge between that private giving and that public receipt of services. That's how it's really funneled down to our not-for-profits, to our governments, so we could provide the critical services to our community. We are working right now in the city of Mount Vernon. Some of the ways that we've been doing public-private partnerships is Cities for Financial Empowerment. We were one of the communities that adopted that very early in the pandemic, where we were providing financial counseling to many of our residents, even remotely, helping them identify ways to get in, you know, get services and get access to money to help with housing and childcare and everything that they were experiencing a deficit in. We are an MGI community, Mayors for Guaranteed Income. And so, you know, we've been working with, you know, Cities for Financial Empowerment, as well as the Rockefeller Foundation. LISC has been working with us to get that money, you know, out to the residents in our community. And so we had 14,000 people start applications for 200 slots. And you know, working with the philanthropies, working with the not-for-profit organizations and government as partners, we can identify what you call evidence-based or evidence-informed programs. You can make sure that you are doing and that you're executing these programs with fidelity, right? Because government, one of the things, people don't have a lot of trust and faith in government. They think government is corrupt and you're just using your position in government to take care of your friends and family. And so when we're working with philanthropic organizations and not-for-profit organizations to help funnel this money to the community and make sure that selection is done properly and that programs are set up properly, it just brings a higher level of confidence from the community with government. You know, again, private organizations and banks and corporations are rarely giving directly to governments, but they give through the philanthropies. And so they've been incredible partners. We're working right now on building generational wealth. And, you know, housing are people's greatest assets. And so how are we helping people to secure housing, to renovate their housing, how to get solar on their roofs, because solar increases the value of their home and it decreases the costs of their electricity and their needs right now. And so that's really important. It's helping to support education. It's helping to support workforce development. Food insecurity is something, you know, in our community, really over about 30% of the people were food insecure. And now we're seeing, you know, with COVID and the increase in inflation, probably it's higher than that. Really, the numbers of people who are food insecure and who are housing unstable. And so it's a critical time for us to work together.
Yes.
As it says, we have to be collaborative. I think oftentimes our giving is fragmented. You know, we give to our churches, we give to our colleges, we give to our fraternities and sororities, but we also have to make sure that, you know, collectively we're working to solve for the challenges that we have, and not just say, oh, my group did this, my group did that. And so I definitely feel that we have to stop fragmenting our giving and pull, really harness the collective strength of our giving. Because Black people give of their net worth at a higher rate than white people do. We're not just recipients of the money, but we give of our money at a higher rate than our, you know, other racial counterparts. And so, you know, the problem is, as it's already been stated, is it's not focused. And we have to be innovative. We have to integrate our giving, and we have to make sure that our giving is having an impact. Because it's not that we don't have wealth, it's just that we are not focusing it and causing and working collectively. So
Thank you. Yeah.
thank you.
No, thank you for that, Mayor. And, again, we continue to mention, fragmented giving is not the approach. So we can find the adequate solution to make sure that our giving is not only collective, but it's strategic and it's purposeful. We can see a lot more advancement and progress. But thank you for highlighting those figures. Before I get to Mayor Evans, I want to just, of course, thank the African American Mayors Association for being a co-sponsor of this event. Mayor Patterson-Howard does serve as the first vice president of the African American Mayors Association. So we definitely thank them for their sponsorship, as well as Black Philanthropy Month 2022. Also want to indicate to please ask any questions from the audience to fill into the Q&A box. I'm going to address one question that was asked about where this is being broadcast. At this time, this is not being broadcast simultaneously, but we are recording the event and we are planning to share it and recording at a later date. So please, thank you so much for, again, attending, and feel free to ask questions. Mayor Evans, I want to definitely get your perspective, one, as again, a former board member of a community foundation, and also as a newly elected mayor, I wanted to understand how, when you were creating your objectives as to what you wanted to do with the city of Rochester, how did you look at your objectives and try to strategize how philanthropy could play a role in the many policies that you were going to set under your administration? Want to hear your perspective on that and what suggestions you have for other municipalities across the country for aligning philanthropy from the community with their policy objectives. Please, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. And it's good to be on with such a distinguished panel. I was lucky in that I got involved with my community foundation when I was like 14 years old. They had a program called Youth as Resources, in which they taught young people about philanthropy. So I was on as a youth, and then I got on their board as an adult. And then I worked for in the financial sector for a while. With my last job before becoming mayor was with ESL Federal Credit Union, which is one of the largest foundations in Rochester. So as mayor, one of the first things I did, one of the first meetings I convened was with every single foundation in our community. And I said, listen, it was the Greater Rochester Health Foundation, the Community Foundation, United Way of Greater Rochester, the Wilson Foundation, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, listen, as mayor, I can't do this alone. I'm gonna need your help. Government has tons of money, especially right now with all the ARPA funds and all the things, money that's coming, the money that will be coming with the infrastructure money. But all that money doesn't mean anything if we don't work to align it. So one of the things I said was to the foundations is, how can we make sure that we're not tripping over each other? How can we make sure that if there are community priorities that we have out there, that we are aligning to make sure that they are aligned? I'm also lucky here in Rochester in that the head of our community foundation that's going to be coming in is an African-American gentleman that I work with closely, and the head of of the ESL Foundation, two of the largest foundations in Rochester, is also an African-American. So they understand uniquely the challenges that African Americans face. I think that philanthropy absolutely has to have a social justice lens, social equity lens. If it doesn't, then we miss the mark. But I think from a government perspective, one of the things that I would tell any mayor or any person is that you have to have philanthropic organizations at the table, and those smaller organizations that I think Dr. Copeland mentioned, because I want to disabuse this notion that African Americans don't give. I got through college because of African American philanthropy. I can't tell you the Bouvier, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, the Urban League, all of these organizations paid for Malik Evans's books and other things that helped me be able to get through college. So, but just at a high level, I would just say to anyone in government that you have to have philanthropy at the table. If you don't, you're missing a major piece of the puzzle in terms of helping you to tackle the most intractable challenges, not only just from the money perspective, but from the data, because they're plugged in. They know what the issues are, and they can bring them to you. They can also tell you from a data standpoint things that might be working, to tell you why you might want to invest ARPA funds in this particular project, and how they may be able to supplement it with supplemental dollars to align it so you get a bigger bang for your buck. So I think the biggest thing and the most easiest thing is inviting philanthropy to the table, and not just some sectors, but all sectors of philanthropy, and making sure that the diversity of the philanthropy community is also there when you start to have these conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Evans. And thank you for pointing out the fact that even with the infrastructure dollars they're trickling down from the federal level all the way down through the municipalities, it's still effective and purposeful to partner with foundations to make sure that where these infrastructure dollars go, that we can make sustainable change, sustainable investment, more progressive investment, should you choose as a municipality leader. And it's really purposeful. And I'm glad that, you were served educationally to have your opportunities met and needs met from various organizations. I wanted to invest in you and hope we can pay that forward. Thank you for your input there, Mayor Evans. Last and certainly not least, I want to talk to Ms. Ebonie Johnson Cooper on the panel. She is very distinguished in her work in the nonprofit community. You can see from the chat that Dr. Copeland acknowledged what Ebonie has done. She's been acknowledged as a leader in this space. Ebonie, I want to ask you, what inspired you to find the Young Black and Giving Back Institute, and how do you work through that institute to connect nonprofit leaders with philanthropy, and why is that so significant? Please, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, no problem. Well, first, I have to shout out my Aggie soror mentor friend, Tonya Wellens, who I can't even begin to name all of the spaces and places where I have been, and my name shows up in, I know because of Tonya, and I share the same respect for Jackie in getting to this place. So my organization, the Young Black Giving Back Institute, is what it is because of women like them. Well before this became trendy or popular to talk about Black philanthropy, it was the work that we were doing and trying to draw attention to Black millennial philanthropy. I use it in air quotes because millennial is now synonymous with all ages under, it feels like 40, but that's neither here nor there. But to draw attention to exactly what we've been saying the entire time, that Black giving is not something, it's not a unicorn, right? It's something that we've always done. It doesn't necessarily fit into this box that folks want to think about it. And it surely does not look like the old white and wealthy is often synonymous with philanthropy, but it is something that we have always done in giving. And so I know as a partial product of Mount Vernon, Mayor Patterson-Howard, one of my mom's best friends is your godmother. I'm the product of Trapphagen and Columbus Elementary School. Grew up at Greater Centennial, right? Bishop Moore is now one of my spiritual fathers. So all of these, I know, right? All of these connective tissues are the result of Black philanthropy and community. Mayor Evans talked about, getting through college, and it was surely, the folks, the relationships my mother built. She worked in Mount Vernon school systems for 30 years, right? Dr. Smith, was right there to get me through, different points of my career at A&T. So when I think about that and the organization that I started, it was really a result of what I had always grown up to know and understand as a child of social workers. And so what we do through our institute as a organization that has a fund at the Greater Washington Community Foundation, we work to provide a capacity for Black-led, Black benefiting organizations through training opportunities. And at this current iteration of what we're doing, we are looking to fill in that giving gap, if you will, by providing micro grant opportunities for organizations. So the day that we'll be celebrating on August 28th is a direct result of that, where we now have over 270 organizations registered for the day. These are all Black-led, Black benefiting nonprofits across the country that will be fundraising and celebrating themselves, right? Being able to shine a light that is ordinarily not given to us. And so we decided to create this unique opportunity because we recognized that it wasn't going to happen any other way. While we love our friends at Giving Tuesday, it's not for us. Small organizations don't really get the shine that they need. Making sure my 13-month-old doesn't tear something up.
I was just going to thank you for being a co-parent in this moment. Realize it comes with the struggle. Yeah.
No, not the vases, buddy. But through where was I? Oh, yes. So on this day, we have the opportunity, or those organizations have an opportunity to fundraise and celebrate. And so we are able to give cash prizes through generosity, like the Greater Washington Community Foundation, which is one of our partners this year. We have opportunities over the course of the event. It's 5 years this year. It's our 5th year doing it. We will be giving, thank you, we'll be giving $1,000 a day away. This is from our institute. And we can only do that through the generosity of our donors. And so we are so excited. We have small organizations that have budgets of 0, and we have organizations that have budgets of over 2 million. And so on the outside, that may sound like pennies, but to these organizations, some raise $1,000, some raise $10,000, $15,000 on this day. It means a lot. Some are raising the money they'll use for the entire year on Give 828. And so that is just a small part of what we, I would like to say, of us being able to fill in the gap for organizations and recognizing that fundraising, financial support, philanthropy is something that we need. And because institutional philanthropy often overlooks us, we had to figure out a way to do it. And so this was one of those unique ways that we figured out to do it.
Absolutely. Ebonie, thank you. Thank you for being the voice. Thank you for being an opportunity and make sure there is equity and giving with the nonprofit community. We know philanthropy is just as important to the nonprofit community as it is to the public sector. So thank you for that. Given the time, I'll ask one more question to each one of the panelists, and then we can go ahead and move forward. But I want to thank everyone again. I wish we had more time to go into this, but it's been such an incredible panel. Ms. Tonya, going back to you, you've been seeing a lot of shout outs this evening, even from Ebonie and the work you're doing there with her Giving Day in 828. But you mentioned earlier something about informal philanthropy, which I'd love for you to expound upon. And should you're interested, why is it important to highlight informal philanthropy within the Black community and its impact? And as well as why is it important to debunk the narrative that Black people do not give? We referenced that a couple of times this evening. You've referenced it. Why is it important to debunk that narrative? Please feel free to expand upon that.
I appreciate you going back to that question. I think that there is so much in what Dr. Copeland offered in your opening conversation. And I would offer, because I spent most of my career prior to the Community Foundation in international development. And she's on to something when it comes to thinking about the experiences, I would say, of indigenous, local, often informal organizations that are working across the entire world. And they are working in community. Sometimes they are below the radar of the international NGOs. They're not picked up by USAID sometimes. And it's the same context. And I remember, and it's so funny, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but 1996, I was in Istanbul, Turkey at a United Nations conference on human settlements. And the entire conference was around, local communities. It was like the local government forum. And then there was a parallel forum of the NGOs, of the nonprofits. And their big advocacy was local government needs to partner with the nonprofit community at the hyper local level, at the most indigenous level. That was 28 years ago. My math might be a little bit off, but that was 1996. And what we're seeing is that some of these issues are cyclical issues. And if we are to pay attention to our history, it will certainly teach us something. That we cannot get the work done at a local community level with integrity and for impact if we're not paying attention to the grassroots organizations who are closest to people. Oftentimes, low-income people, poor people, Black and brown people don't want a handout. They need some support, but they're looking for organizations who really believe in them, much the same way that the organizations Mayor Evans spoke about, who are investing in their capacity and their personal agency. And so I just think it's important that we even in organized philanthropy and in local government, that we are doing the work to bridge the gap between, again, the big anchor organizations who we know can operate at scale, but not overlooking small organizations, primarily those, and I would say houses of worship that continue to play a pivotal and important role in locally based community development. So I am aligning behind Dr. Copeland's vision around some global alignment. National alignment, I would say first is a first priority, or local, even regional alignment, national, and then hopefully global alignment when it comes to the principles of our giving, and the ambitions for impact. You know, Black people do hard things all the time, and we have for, you know, generations. So I am fully confident that we have the ability, once we put our mind to it, to get far more organized than we are right now. We're doing all right, and there's a lot of work for us to do. And I know with my sorors on this panel, especially, that we're about getting that work done.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sonia, thank you, and thank you for
Yes,
your
thank you for the
input.
opportunity.
Absolutely. Mayor Patterson-Howard, again, this will be the last question to you for the evening, but I do appreciate your input, and I'm sorry we haven't had more time in such an incredible conversation. You brought up something earlier about only a portion of the funds from 2020 that have been dedicated towards racial equity have been actually given. And a lot of members in the community have spoken about, you know, companies or organizations dedicating funds to social justice because it's popular at the time. You know, unfortunately, you know, George Floyd and other instances where the community was being tapped upon, but they haven't completely come through with their commitment. How does the community hold these institutions accountable for actually following through on their commitment to racial equity? And how can, again, the Black leaders in the philanthropic or CSR spaces make sure that these institutions hold themselves accountable? If you can speak to that, please, Mayor.
You know, the one thing that we have to speak honestly about is that there is always a reluctance to give money to the organizations that really get the work done. We're always looking for sponsor organizations or lead organizations, and they'll subcontract with the people who are really getting the work done. But the money has to go to the kitchen table organizations. There has to be trust. You recognize that we're doing the work. You recognize that we have boots on the ground in the community. You recognize that we have access and partnership. But then oftentimes they hide behind the fact that they're not sure if we have the financial and the administrative infrastructure to be able to write the report. And so they hesitate to give the money. Then they look for the organizations that have that infrastructure, but they don't have the agency, they don't have the relationships, they don't have the sense of urgency. And so the money gets stuck in this pipeline that goes absolutely nowhere. And so, you know, kind of like MGI, people said, you're giving people $500 a month. I said, oh my God, it's not like I'm giving them $1 million a year, it's $6,000 a year. And they know how they need to use this money, whether it's for childcare or housing or food or gas or you know, whatever it is. And so, you know, you can't say that you want to help a community and then you can't trust them. And then you create structures. The system will function as design. And if the system is designed only to give money to big agencies that have a long history and track record of managing money, but they absolutely have no track record of working with the community that you say you want to give the money to, that's a problem. And so we have to find some middle ground. And oftentimes that's the challenge. Even Biden, you know, when we gave money for Build Back Better and we said we wanted to make sure that we stopped rental evictions and we wanted to prevent those, they gave money to the states. The states had a hard time getting it to the cities, who got it to the not-for-profits, who got it to the people. So we have to stop being so afraid of the money not being handled right that we don't give it. You could allocate it, but if it never reaches the people that it's supposed to get to, then, you know, what does it matter? And I see that as being one of the biggest challenges is we want to give the money to the big name organizations. And I have nothing against the United Way. I have nothing against the Y. I was a Y CEO for 12 years, Boys and Girls Club, you know, but what about Miss Connie's Kitchen? You know, what about not, I mean, literally, you know, not necessarily a kitchen, but she's doing the work. She's feeding the people in the community. There are people who are going and working with people to go to the Department of Social Services. There are people who are showing up in court every day because they've been on the rent eviction line trying to save their housing, and they're just using their lived experience to go out here and help people. We have to build the capacity of our smaller organizations, and then we have to trust them to get the work done. And we cannot put systems and structures around this money that are just so huge that the money goes nowhere. Money sitting in a box that never gets to the people is useless. It's nice to say that you've given it, but if it hasn't moved down to the trickle down theory is not working. And that's the biggest problem. So we have to trust the people who actually have the relationships, who have the commitment, who have the passion to do this work and get it done. It's really, really not rocket science, but the trust has to happen. And if you want us to trust you as a corporation and give you our business after you have not necessarily been corporately responsible or socially responsible in the past, then you have to do the same thing for us and know that we are sophisticated enough, and that while we like orange, we don't want to wear it every day, that we can take the money and get it to the community that needs it most.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Mayor. Thank you for the input. And to that point, I want to thank Mayor Evans and her team for lending us the webinar this evening, and to her colleague Kalia for supporting us tonight. Thank you. Mayor Evans, again, in interest of time, the last question is going to go to you, or sorry, this will be the last question to you, and then I'll have a question for Ebonie. But we've talked tonight about, reversing fragmented giving. We've talking about now with Mayor Patterson-Howard's comments of holding institutions accountable to give. You've spoken about even with partnering with the infrastructure dollars and funding from the federal government, how we could partner with philanthropy to make sure the money that we give into community is meaningful, sustainable, and impactful. Where do you envision, or where would you like to see public-private partnerships be as far as growth over the next 3 to 5 years, throughout your term and in other terms throughout the country? Where would you like to see public-private partnerships manifest themselves into over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I like to see it aligned on some of the most critical issues that we have in our community. The issues from 50 years ago, sadly, they haven't changed. Housing, economic inequality, healthcare. These are all issues that, particularly in the African American community, were challenges 50 years ago. And I would venture to say that even the pandemic has exacerbated it even further. And in fact, I put on my banker hat. I was a banker for a long time. I guess once a banker, always a banker, but home ownership was something that was extremely important to me. But if you look at the home ownership rate, for example, for African Americans, it's much lower than any other demographic, no matter where you go in the country. And Rochester is no different than anywhere else as a medium-sized city in America. So aligning around a lot of these intractable issues with our philanthropic and corporate partners to try to solve a lot of these things together. Alone, we will not be able to solve a lot of these issues. But if we're able to align in a way and bring in particularly Black voices as we seek to solve these problems, I think that we can at least make a dent at it. So really, alignment around those issues, I think, is critical in order to try to make a dent in these challenges that we face.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Evans. And then, of course, Ebonie, again, I know it's 7 o'clock. The last question is going to go to you. And I want to take a question from the audience. An audience member had asked, what do we do? I'm man-spinning here. What do we do about the power of giving circles, and how can we work with young people to encourage them to give and help them understand where to contribute their dollars within the community? Power giving social circles, and also working with young people to make sure that they're part of philanthropic spaces. You can speak to that, and I want to thank Dexter Evans for contributing that conversation, that question. Ebonie, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually said I was going to try to touch on it. So giving circles are probably one of my favorite ways to give. That's one of my entrees to Black Philanthropy. I was part of a giving circle that literally just closed its doors this year. And so it's a way back to what Mayor Patterson was speaking about with regard to trust, because largely grassroots organizations that are led by us aren't trusted by institutional philanthropy, which is really what it comes down to, right? Impact reporting and, capacity this, and, all of the things that we may not have the resources to provide, like dominant or mainstream organizations, leads us to ask, well, why do our organizations have to feel as if they have to bend over backwards, right, to provide this? And then if we can't, then we aren't eligible for these funds. We're not even asked to remit RFPs, and it comes down to trust. And so particularly when you look at other organizations that do half the work and get triple quadruple amounts of the money. And so what giving circles allow us to do is for us to pool our resources as young or old people and give them back to the community in a way that we know is going to serve our communities best. The Giving Circle I was a part of for almost 12 years served the greater Washington area, as well as Prince George's County. And we knew the organizations. We would get at least 80 applications every grant round, and we were able to give the monies back to our organizations through our process, right? But it worked, and it wasn't just about giving funds, which of course was the primary way, but it was also about providing capacity support, so volunteering, board service, all the things that we needed. And so through Giving Circles, I believe is one of the most powerful ways outside of individual giving that we can make an impact in our community, because we create the rules, we make the rules, and we know the organizations that are receiving the funds, and they're quite easy to set up. And if you are connected with your community foundation plug, then they can be a great resource to help you house the funds that you have, as well as the administrative support that you need. So I'm all for Giving Circles, and there are other websites that kind of provide the support, but there is a community of Giving Circles, one you can find through the Community Investment Network. If you go on, you'll find a number of Black Giving Circles across the country as a way to plug in if you're looking for a Giving Circle to be a part of.
Absolutely. Dexter, I hope you don't mind me paraphrasing that question. But thank you for the question, Ebonie. Thank you for your response. Thank you to all our speakers tonight. Thank you again to the African American Mayors Association, Black Philanthropy Month 2022. Dr. Copeland, thank you for bringing us together 20 years ago on this and really kickstarting something that is going to be a strong legacy and celebrating and bringing together Black philanthropy across the world for it to be more impactful. I encourage all of you to support Black Philanthropy Month 2022. And every one of the organizations, institutions that we heard about tonight, and from these speakers, and to follow the work in their administrations, and to hopefully idolize them and realize what they're doing and lead by example with the positive work. I thank you all for joining us, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Virgil.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Virgil. Good night. Good
Thank
night.
you. Good night,
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
All the best. Nice to meet you all.
Yes.
You too.
Clay, you can conclude.
Can you stop the recording, Kalia? If y'all could stay on for a second?
Okay.
Okay, let me see if I can stop the recording without ending the whole webinar.